I'd like to call to order the September 24th meeting of the City of Lansing Charter Commission. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Adam Simon.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
Commissioner Boyd. Commissioner Dowd. Here. Commissioner Jeffries.
Here.
Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Kawhi. Commissioner Washington. There are 8 members present, a quorum. No members are absent.
Thank you. Now would be the time for a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved. Is there support? It's moved and supported. Are there any changes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the agenda is adopted. We're under approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve. Our special meeting that was held on September 7th. Is there a motion in order to approve those minutes?
Second.
Moved and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, passes. They are approved. We also have a set of minutes for a regular session of September 10th. Is there a motion to approve those? It's been moved.
Second.
Moved and supported. Are there any changes, additions, deletions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, minutes are approved. Now it's time for public comment.
Okay, so we're to public comment. Speakers have up to 3 minutes. And we do have 1 virtual speaker, but first we have 2 folks in the room. Michael Syracuse, followed by Chris Laughlin, and Michael does have a handout that I will pass out to the commissioners as he's stepping up.
Good. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Syracuse, and I'm a resident of downtown Lansing and a licensed Michigan attorney. I've reviewed the Charter's meetings with great interest, and I recognize the important undertaking before all of you. I implore you all not to squander this opportunity to fix some glaring issues that have plagued this city for the last 40 years. The glaring issue I would like to address with you this evening concerns the unregulated power of the Board of Water and Light. As currently drafted, the city charter allows the Board of Water and Light to enact its own budget, set its own rates, have full control of the revenue it draws from billing, perform its own audits, cut off services, and set its own rates of compensation for its officers and employees. And this is simply too much power for a publicly owned utility, especially since there are no controls on it by the City Council or the Mayor's office, or the public for which it is supposed to serve. As it stands right now, the Board of Water and Light has more power and influence on the Lansing residents than the City Council. Lansing residents have no control over it via electoral politics. Okay, and this is effectively taxation without representation. To address this, I offer the Commission the following summary of suggested changes. I hope you all have a copy. The detailed document has also been submitted electronically, and I hope that will appear on the publicly owned website at some point. Those changes include make the Board of Water and Light an advisory board instead of an administrative board. If you'll recall from your own review, which I've seen, you'll understand the difference between the advisory administrative board status. Allow BWL to draft its budget, but as per usual, but make it subject to city approval and the mayor's office. Remove the Board of Water and Light's power to appoint its own auditor. Audits are necessary, but under the current charter language, the BWO has no incentive to keep its books honest and accurate. Instead, let the City Council appoint the auditor and have the auditor report directly to the council instead of the board. Remove BWL's power to set its own rates of pay for employees and officers. I can think of no other city, county, state, or federal public servant that gets to set his own salary. This must be changed. Retain the Board of Water and Light's power to make rate adjustment recommendations, but make them subject to City Council rate approval before they go into effect. That way the Lansing residents can know which City Council members approve the rates of change and why. Remove the Board of Water and Light's power to appoint its own hearing officers. Instead, have a hearing officer appointed by the council. Empower the Board of Ethics to reverse actions taken by the Board of Water and Light, or to void contracts entered into it by the Board of Water and Light. If you make these changes, Lansing will still have a functional public utility, but it will not be an unregulated utility. It will be a public utility subject to review by the council and the mayor and the citizens of Lansing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Fred McLaughlin, who will be followed by our virtual participant, Ana Martinez-Hugh. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah. Could you go to the next person and could I come back to me? Is that all right?
Jack, can you work that? Okay. No, the person is not signed in, so apparently they're not going to be here. So now is your chance, Fred. Or we can
Oh, okay.
pick you up in the second session.
Okay. I'm Fred McLaughlin. I live at 1407 West Holmes Road. I sent all of you too late, probably, but this afternoon, a series of connections to videos that were explaining some of the issues I've tried to voice something about in concern with the changing of the charter, and it has to do with urban planning and zoning. And even for myself, I've been trying to figure out what is it I'm really trying to say. And because I know these are important factors in the making up of the city, and this is the document where they get empowered. This is where they are created. And so it finally occurred to me to maybe take a hint from the, the preamble that says, "We the people." And I just kind of reworded it. This may sound a little hokey, but anyway, we the people of Lansing, Michigan, in order to form a more perfect community, and so forth along the way, except for defense would be security and the other benefits that. But the thing that struck me about that statement is it really is a crucial statement. It's basically the charter for the United States. And we're doing the same thing here in the city of Lansing. And the one factor that I've been overlooking is what ties all of this together. And what I'm talking about is the word community. All of these things that make up the charter are spoken about individually. You know, we speak about economic development, we speak about empowerment of officers that make up the city, and so on and so forth. But there's nothing really there that really strongly speaks to the issue of community. And the truth is that none of those things individually are as important as community. Community is the issue, as I see it. It's the issue. All these things have to come together and result in a community. So, and I think sometimes that economic development gets overplayed. It's important, but it's not the most important thing. I mean, the most important thing is community. For me, that has to do with affordable housing. And if people aren't well served in each one of these areas, something's out of balance. And there's always this drumbeat about economic development. Yeah, it has importance, but it doesn't form in and of itself a community. So the point I'm trying to make is that somewhere we need to have something really strong in this document that results in us saying, yes, we have a community. And that's really what I'm looking for. And I'm wrestling with the details of that.
Thank you. All right, so since our online virtual participant is not here,
They are here.
oh, they're here now. Okay, now they're here. Okay. All right, so Ana Martinez-Hugh.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Anna. I'm a Lansing resident from Ward 2. I was at the last Charter Commission meeting where myself and several other residents spoke to you all about our interest in seeing an ethical investment clause included in the Lansing City Charter. And we shared a draft of what many of us thought this clause could and should look like. Now, as you all move into this next phase of your work, where you're making decisions about the revision process, I think it will be very important for the commission to be clear with the Lansing community about how decisions are made, especially when community members may, over the course of the next 2 years, come with proposals for revisions, articles, or chapters within the charter, or propose entirely new components or clauses of the charter that hadn't existed in it prior. I think some community dialogue, when those things are being considered, will be crucial. In addition, I understand that your work in revising the charter is guided in part by the Municipal League, including some of the mandatory provisions that would be included in charters, and you're probably looking at examples of other charters or model charters in this process. However, I'd like to lift up that these are guides and frameworks, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this new charter can be creative and inclusive of what residents are asking for. 40 years since the last revision is a really long time, and the ethics and cultural dynamics of our city have shifted in that time too. Charters should absolutely reflect that. So I just want to empower you all to be creative and meaningfully responsive and inclusive in this next phase of your work to what community members and groups tell you and have already told you about how they want to see their city not only operate, but how it reflects the culture and values of the people who live there. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that was it for our public comment, so we are to officer reports.
Under officer reports, first is from the chair. I have no report. Vice Chair?
No report.
Mr.
Okay, thank you. I do have a budget update, and it is in the back pocket of Commissioner's binders. And it does provide detail of each item of expenditure. As of right now, the expended balance is $122,000 and change, leaving a remaining balance of just short of $378,000. So happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Any questions for the clerk?
And then also, if you want to acknowledge, there are some written communications in the commissioners' packets. And then to let folks know that we are streaming on Facebook for the first time tonight.
All right. Here we
So that
go.
has been implemented.
Thank you.
That's it.
Now is the time for presentations. We have Christian Riwa from Cummings, McClary, Davis, and Etcho. These are the firm that we retained. She was one of the 3 attorneys that was presented to us in the review that we did when we did the interviews. Alan Vanderline and Matt Cross are the other 2 attorneys, and they will appear from time to time. But Kristen, I believe you're the one that will be primarily seated here to be providing us some representation. So Kristen, do you just want to give us an overview of how you see things, how we should be moving forward through the process at this time?
Sure, thank you. And we're really pleased to be here and able to help and assist you through this process. It's not often that a city gets to do this. So there really is no framework necessarily about how to do it, particularly at this point in the endeavor. But I bring to your attention the idea of structure. And I sort of see that in sort of three ways. So it's let's look at, as you move forward and really start to tackle this and work through this, what's the structure of the document? What's the structure of the government work? So when we look at the structure of the document, this is what we envision as again, we are working on something that's something within the 4 corners of the page here. You could, if you wanted, completely overhaul the charter and start from a blank page and move forward. We don't think you necessarily need to, but understand that that is a possibility. So you have to decide sort of what level of rewrite do you actually need to do in order to effectuate what you think the citizens of Lansing would like to see moving forward. Is it a reorganization? So maybe the structure generally fits, but maybe things need to be moved around a bit. You certainly have that is your prerogative to look at that as you're drafting. So again, think of this as, a document and the structure of the document. A lot of times with this endeavor, look at, are there sort of philosophies of drafting or writing that you want to bring to the document as you're tackling the subject matter of the document. So for example, looking at outdated language. This is often the time when charter commissions will look at, the example is removing gendered language from the charter. Fortunately for you all, you're already dealing with a relatively modern document, with this being from the late 70s. That's pretty new in terms of charters, so that's good. It's already more modern language than what a lot of other cities already have. So I didn't actually see a lot of gendered pronouns, for example. But as you're tackling this and looking at the subject matter of your structure of the government, what's the structure of the document, and are there outdated language that you think it's appropriate to update? An example, by way of example, I was just sort of spot checking through the charter. The non-discrimination clause and civil rights clause uses the word handicap. Well, in more modern version of discrimination statute language, Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act, that the ADA, it's referred to as disability. So it's little but important things like that you need to think about this as sort of a philosophical decision as you're drafting moving forward. There may also, in terms of outdated language in the charter, there may be times where there have been changes in the law such that what's currently in the charter really can no longer be in the charter because it conflicts with state or federal law, or it may just not need to be in the charter anymore because of what the state of the law is. The other sort of thing to keep in mind too is the language outdated for the needs of the citizens of Lansing? So, for example, are there references to certain city departments that no longer exist, or certain city offices that no longer exist or have been renamed? So it's things like that where you're going to want to think about updating as you move through. I think the other thing to keep in mind in terms of structure of the document is when you're asked to look at a whole lot of policy decisions, a whole lot of important aspects of city government, is the charter the correct vehicle for this? Not every policy decision really can or should be in the charter, because remember, when you get the charter established and hopefully you all get it voted through and it becomes the new charter, that's going to remain in a very difficult method of amendment if it needs to be amendment. So you can think about perhaps establishing what maybe the philosophies or general policy goals are for the city, but you may want to have circumstances where you leave the ability to further develop policy or ordinance to the elected city officials later to be able to more quickly respond to changing conditions, changing sentiments, changing demographics. So for example, and I'll just to kind of reiterate that point, if the citizens of Lansing decide that AI is something that's really important to put in the city charter, you may not want to get super specific about that right now, because none of us know what's going on now, much less what it'll look like 5, 10, 20 years from now. So just again, as an example, when we're talking about subject matter. Again, there is no method or specific required rubric for how you attack which provisions need to be rewritten or how. You could start small with small discrete aspects of the charter that you think need reworded, and then kind of move up. We actually recommend that you start big. Start with the most fundamental issues and structures of the government, and then drill down into more specific granular aspects, because often your choices in the biggest, most fundamental aspects of the structure of the government are going to have a cascading effect and affect other decisions. So, I think the biggest example of this would be a determination of whether City of Lansing remains a strong mayor form of government, or you look at moving over to a city manager form of government. Your decision there will have a substantial effect on how we draft this moving forward, and what your decisions are on other things like other board, the lower level boards and commissions, the officers, and all of these things. So, I think it's probably easier to start larger, understanding that some of those really, the really big issues that need to be tackled could take longer as well, but then that gives you that longer amount of time to tackle these things, so you're not, sort of running out of time at the end. So again, we do recommend you look sort of broad and go narrow, but again, it's up to you. But looking at the broader aspects of starting with the form of government, and then I would suggest even looking at first the sort of top down. So what is the structure of your mayor function? What is the structure of your city council function? Understanding when you make sort of generalities of where you want to head toward concepts, that can give us guidance in terms of drafting that we can then bring language to you to really just sort of slice and dice and look at. And then later on, as we work toward more granular things, we may need to kind of revisit some of those decisions in a more specific way as you delve down into the more granular. Then, also, obviously there are topics that need to be addressed and may be addressed within the charter as well. And again, it's up to you to decide how to do it. But certainly there are mandatory provisions of the charter that have to be maintained, and important not just to look at what's already in there as a mandatory provision, but making sure that as you do that, we ensure that the language in there is consistent with the state of the law as it currently exists. So then, topics, for example, would include tax, elections, miscellaneous things. And just, have we covered everything in the Home Rule Cities Act? And not just mandatory of what you have to have, but what's possible. So, review through the Home Rule Cities Act, and is there something else that the citizens of Lansing may think beneficial and would like to see in their charter that either the Home Rule Cities Act specifically permits you to do, or is general as a function of home rule you're allowed to do. So again, I guess looking at that in a more creative aspect with some things, to the extent you're able, consistent with state and sometimes federal law. So then finally, the structure of the work. Now's time to get to work. What does that look like? And I think this is, I think I'm really just repeating what a lot of you have said during the course of these presentations is, develop that list of topics that you're going to tackle, because this is big work. And it's going to take a while to develop, and by developing that sort of list of topics, an order of operations that you want to tackle them, that not only gives you the opportunity to make sure that you've gathered enough information that you think you need to make the decision, but then also provide feedback to us on how to draft it so we can bring something to you for consideration. And when doing that, making sure that the structure of how this is drafted is as transparent as possible. So again, maybe there's an initial discussion about concepts to direct us on how to do this, and then we can draft and present actual language, and you can slice and dice the language in an open meeting with the ability for people to watch, comment, and give their input to you. And then also too, just how do you see the structure of the work going, and how involved do you want our legal work to be in this as well? So is this something you want us to be present at every meeting? Is this something that you want us to be the primary drafters, or do you want to be, divide up into subcommittees and be primary drafters, and then we sort of spot check and provide guidance? Again, this is your board, this is your project, so for the most part, you get to drive what the structure looks like, just understanding that transparency is really important in a project like this. A lot of times people like to be handed, here's the key, here's the list of things of how you do it, and you just don't have that here. But so hopefully you take hope and I guess empowerment in that this is your work and you drive what it looks like. We're here to help you in that endeavor. So if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions at this time? Anyone? Hearing great presentation up here. Thank you very much. All right. Well, taking the attorney's advice, going into new business, we have just down as a general discussion item tonight, the form of government. And then we've had discussions about this over the past couple of meetings where, in terms of moving forward, I think, we talked about making that big decision. Are we going to stay with the strong mayor form of government, or are we going to look at doing a city manager form of government? Whatever we decide to do is going to really then determine how we move on the rest of the charter and how detailed we're going to have to get to make whatever it is that we decide happens. So at this point, it's up for a discussion item. There's no action to be taken tonight. Just wanted to start that discussion. Hopefully we'll have some speakers at our next meeting. We're looking to line up Mayor Shore, who was available tonight, but we wanted him and Mayor Hollister to appear at the same time, or maybe one after the other. We also have, I believe, Council President Garza and former council member Carol Wood that would be available at our next meeting as well to do a small presentation and then start moving down that road, just getting impressions and understandings from their work that they have had that might help guide us and lead us in a certain direction. And so tonight I just wanted to open this up to a discussion item as to the form of government. Anybody would like to begin that conversation? Commissioner Lopez?
Yeah, I think based on the presentation, the big item obviously is the form of government. Whether we want to stay with it or move on to another one. Then the next to me would be the ward system, a review of the ward makeup of the city. And thereon, there may be the third big item. But to me, those are the two big items that really need to be addressed before we go into the other lesser items that we have to come back and address: the form of government, the council makeup, so on and so forth.
Okay. Commissioner Washington?
I'm actually going to talk about the strong mayor and the city manager aspect, because I think that's the most important thing we have to nail down before we do anything. Even with the council, do we have 9 wards or do we keep what we have? But the strong mayor, and I've done a lot of research on this throughout the summer, and I have come to the conclusion, and I will not be very wordy, I prefer a strong mayor form, because without that there are no checks and balances. And I have served on councils and have watched councils that have not necessarily been the best councils by a long shot. And I think to have a city manager that gives council no checks and balances on council, and it also is really just another form of strong mayor. They do all the hiring, they make all the business decisions, but the difference is we can't elect them out. And I thought long and hard about what a lot of people have said regarding wanting a city manager. And it really boiled down to more that they don't like this mayor. And I don't think we make decisions on the person in the seat. We make decisions on what's best for our city. And for me, I will be supporting a strong mayor because I truly believe in checks and balances. I think we have to be very thoughtful in this charter, however, to balance the authorities. We have to really look at what should go over to council. Like, I think commission and ad board appointments should be done by the council and vetted by the mayor, rather than the other way around. But we can talk about that later. There are a lot of reasons, but I will definitely be supporting the strong mayor rather than the city manager, because I think too much can get lost when they're not really accountable to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I like our government to be accountable to us. So that's my stand.
Commissioner Boyd?
I too will be supporting a strong mayor form of government. I came into this with an open mind. During the campaign, there was a lot of talk about a city manager. And so I've done different research than you have, Commissioner Washington, but I have done research, and I've talked to people, both current city government and past city government. I've talked to past mayors, and I think it does come down to accountability. And the thing that strikes me in all of my conversations about all of the charter issues that we'll have to deal with is that it really comes down to people. It's who are the people that are serving in these jobs, and that is what makes the difference. It's not how it's formed. But I do believe that a strong mayor is best for our city, and therefore I too will be supporting it.
Commissioner Cowie.
I'd just like to agree with Commissioner Washington and Commissioner Boyd. I think when we were talking to the community as a whole prior to our meetings, and when we had our meetings, it probably was about 50-50, but the accountability factor plays a heavy role on that. And just because you don't like someone doesn't mean that you should change the system. We have elections, and those are where people are accountable from. If someone that you put in place doesn't have there, and with a city manager, that you take that part off the chessboard. So I think accountability calls for everything, and us keeping that, again, changes. We see a lot of changes within the structure, especially with power between the mayor and city council. But us keeping a strong mayor and having our community and people that we represent being able to vote for that position should be the right thing.
Madam Vice Chair.
Yes, I agree with the previous speakers. I do believe in accountability, leadership, efficiency, and visibility. All along, I've said that you don't have to dismantle an entire system because you don't like someone personally. Get the right person in that position and allow the people to their voices to be heard. And I personally want to elect the CEO of the city of Lansing. Thank you.
Commissioner Dowd.
Thank you. Agree the accountability factor, and I think to further the discussion, because I'm in agreement on the strong mayor system, I do think what I would like to explore as we talk through folks in the upcoming conversations, people that have been here, especially interested in hearing from a couple of mayors in their opinion. If with the current council structure, is there a way that the mayor has ability to be is that your tie-breaking vote? Is there a way the mayor is more involved with decision through council, and what does that look like? Does that stand to allow for some checks and balances? Maybe not, but where does that go as far as handling council, right? And where does that relationship? Because right now that feels more of the strain, right? The mayor kind of has this little thing out here, and the council has their thing, and if they don't like each other, don't work together well, then there's just it doesn't work, right? And if there's a good marriage between the council and the mayor, things work really well. But when that doesn't happen, I think that's our issue. And how do we draft it into language that allows for the mayor to still be interactive with the council when decisions are made?
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson.
Yeah, so I would just like to add to the conversation that when we dive deeper into the charter, when we're talking about accountability for the mayor specifically, I think currently a lot of citizens feel like there is no accountability because of the lack of transparency. And so I just want to make sure that as we continue to have conversations, we explore what that can look like to have true accountability, right? I think that people feel like the city as a whole is unaware of what's actually being done or not being done. And so they feel like there's no accountability because of that. So I just want to make sure that we can explore that a little bit deeper if we continue to have a strong mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Washington.
And one thing I would like all of us to consider and think about in the next couple weeks is I don't have a position one way or the other at this point, but perhaps we should examine and look at term limits for maybe the mayor and council. And I say that because there becomes a sense of entitlement and ownership when some folks sit too long. And and I don't know how I really feel about this right now, but I would like you all to think about that possibility and bring some thoughts forward, because it's something I think I would like to explore. I know Commissioner Bauer and Commissioner Jeffries know exactly what I'm talking about, and there's a real danger in that, and there's a real danger with having constant name recognition. Doesn't necessarily get us the best people in the spot. So I just think these are some things that we have to really consider as we move forward, and the balancing of that authority. And Ben, as we go forward, as far as the tie-breaking vote, we can go to 7 wards, 9 wards, but I don't think it's necessary that the executive office and council always get along. That's the checks and balances. If everybody's agreeing, somebody's voice is not being heard. So I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. They shouldn't be downright hatred by any stretch of the imagination. It should be professional. But I don't think it has to be a kumbaya all the time. I never have thought that. So thank you.
Commissioner Boyd?
As I said at the NAACP hearing, I think a little gridlock can be important, and so I too don't think everybody has to get along all the time. But to your point, Commissioner Washington, I will have to say, and I've said it to others, and I'll say it on the record, I'm against term limits. I voted for term limits at the state level. It was one of the worst votes I ever cast. I rue the day that I voted for term limits. I'm not afraid to admit that I did it, but I will not ever vote for a term limit again. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bauer?
I'll try this without dissolving into coughing. My apologies. Just a couple of things. I have been, it's been very interesting to me as I've talked to people in the community, and these are not people really knowledgeable about city government, great citizens who've lived here a long time. But as we have talked to, as I've said to them, what do you think, city manager, mayor? Very interestingly, almost all of them want the ability to vote their mayor in or out. And they're a little reticent about having somebody hire, meaning the city council, hire a mayor, and then they're a step removed from that process. So that was very interesting to me. The other thing is, and many of us have talked to Dave Hollister, and of course, I happen to think he was probably one of the greatest mayors we've ever had, revitalized the city, kept General Motors, which was huge, but he has said there is no way that we could have kept General Motors if we had not had a strong mayor form of government. He was just, so he is absolutely opposed to a city manager for a capital city of our size. So I think that's that opinion is very important to me. I too, like Commissioner Boyd, was open to a city manager. I mean, I've been on city council. Sometime I've thought, oh, it would be so much easier if the city council could just hire the city manager, then you would all get along better because you hired the person. But the more I have thought about it and listened to people in the community, I think I support staying with a strong mayor form of government. And second, some of the things said, that doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of other things to look at as part of the process that could make it a more effective governance model. I'd like to look at, and I don't know if there's any way to do this, you know, the charter calls for an executive assistant to the mayor, who in essence is like a city manager, should be somebody who knows how to run a city. That's what I'm concerned about. I want to be sure we have people who know how to run something, run a city, and run it well. And I don't know that we could really, I don't know what we could do in a charter, but I'd like to investigate that. You know, have other cities, do they have any kind of language with a strong mayor that outlines more maybe the duties or the role of that person?
Commissioner Anderson?
Oh, I just wanted to ask Commissioner Boyd, I guess, for more insight as to why you're against term limits. I just want to understand a little bit more, if that's okay.
I think at the end of the day, people get to vote. And I think if they like a person, if the person is serving them well, then the voters will decide, should they stay in office or shouldn't they stay in office? I have plenty of personal experience on this issue. I used to work for Dick Austin, you know? He was 81 and he was running for re-election and he didn't win. And so it's just based on personal experience and the fact that I think the vote is very important. I think you mentioned that people that you've talked to in the community, Commissioner Bauer, want the right to vote. And I think term limits takes away the right to vote. So that's why I'm against it.
Thanks for that explanation.
Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. When I first spoke, I spoke about the big issues, right? And one was governance. I too have spoken to various people, and by and large, for the city, they say, they want to vote for the mayor, period. But they also think that looking at other cities larger than ours who have city managers and how the progress that those cities have made, has it been the city council manager situation, the difference, or what is it? So just in comparison. But you said, Commissioner Bowers, that I too was thinking about, can we insert some language that gives a general job description for the mayor's chief of staff, or whatever they call it, or deputy mayor, whatever it is? Could we insert some language that says this person must have at least, years of experience working in city government, blah, blah, blah. And I too, like you said, can we do that? Is that okay? Is that legal? And there may be other things, that we might think about language to strengthen, maybe boards and commissions and so on and so forth. Obviously, the things you mentioned with the civil rights and those kinds of things, bring them up to date. But yeah, those are the things that I have heard from the community. And so I guess we'll just continue the discussion. But it's interesting how at the end of the day, they still want to vote for a mayor. And like somebody else said, I think it was you or someone. And I tell them this, it really doesn't matter what form of government we have. If we don't elect people that are going to do the things for the community, it doesn't matter if we have a manager or a strong mayor. So we have to be better informed citizens in order to get at least the people that we think that are going to do good for the community, as it was mentioned by one of our speakers. It's got to be for the community. But if we insert some language that kind of lifts that up, we may have something there.
Have Commissioner Boyd and then Commissioner Dowd.
I think we had a question. You mentioned that there were cities larger than Lansing that have managers that have done better than we have done as a city. What were you referring to? Grand Rapids? What?
Grand Rapids, and there's one in East Michigan, one of the larger cities that has a city manager as well.
Okay.
Yeah, there's several. I'm not sure if Warren is the one, but there are. And so I think
Warren has a mayor, but anyway.
Yeah,
Commissioner
well,
Dow.
whatever. But just take Grand Rapids, for example.
Well, I don't know if you can compare Lansing to Grand Rapids. They have a lot of private money that helps that city, so.
Well, I understand that, but
Commissioner Dowd.
the form of government.
All right, thank you. Before just to clarify my last point, because I understand the way that it came across and the kumbaya factor, that's certainly not what I meant. Because I don't want people to take that the wrong way, and that I want everybody to walk out of here and hold hands and skip down the sidewalk. But I do, what I was getting to that point is, I think there needs to be a defined role of the mayor as involved with council. As you see the mayor now at council meetings, there's no involvement, like the mayor's there, right? There's, what is the purpose of the mayor and relationship with council? There's some of that is laid out in the charter, but I think it just probably some more defined role of how that relationship should work. That's where I was getting to. The second thing, I'm just curious. So we kind of all got on here and said we're in support of this, but I want to open the space if there are folks that have counteroffers, or not counteroffers, but opinions. I want to hear that too, because if I want to know if there's a strong conviction for why the strong mayor system is not right, especially among this body. I would love to hear that. And if there's, most of us jumped around, we're excited to say that, but I think that we need to offer a space for those views as well.
Commissioner Washington.
I wanted to comment on what Commissioner Boyd and Bauer said. First of all, Commissioner Boyd, I agree with you on term limits, because you can be right in the middle of something and your terms are up. I really see the good and bad of both. So that's why I say at this point I have no strong feeling. And I can see what it's done in the House and the Senate. But I don't know, I'm also not a great one for career politicians either, because that kind of ends up not being a government for the people, by the people. So I'm not even there yet. But to your point, we absolutely need to define these department head jobs. I am not in favor of a deputy mayor by any stretch of the imagination, but we really need to bolster what we expect from the chief of staff, and that should be the quasi-city city manager. And I think we need to do it even more importantly, because too often those positions are given to people for nothing more than political favor, and not because they really have the qualifications for what they should be doing.
Other speakers? Commissioner Cowie.
Just to reiterate on what you said, Ben, I do believe the members or community members that were really in strong favor of a city manager will probably be at our next meeting. Or our emails will be inundated with a lot of their proposals. So I do believe, again, we have not made this was really our own, opinions tonight.
Correct.
But the discussion that we will have, they will be here. So I know a couple in general right now I can think of probably are emailing me right now. But so we will definitely hear from them. And again, we have not signed and put anything in black and white. So it would be really good to hear how they figure that, how they see that. And again, we heard that they have done their research too, just like we did. So they have looked at Ann Arbor, they've looked at, I think Pontiac, just did that, one of the places. And they have looked at those places and also came to their own conclusion too. So all of us would enjoy to hear and see, the other side of the coin and what they would bring to the table in their comments. Thank you.
One last comment. Councilmember Washington.
Nobody's called the question. One thing I heard.
Did someone call the question? I didn't hear it. It was my bad.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people already that want a city manager and their reasonings, and I think probably a lot of us have. But just one thing I wanted to clear up as far as the mayor at the city council meetings. Those city council meetings are city council's business meetings. They're not the mayor's meeting. They're not the public's meeting. They are the city council business meeting. The mayor's only job at those meetings is to be available for information, and that's why you don't see the interaction. They're not invited to his executive staff meetings, and they're not a part of it, and that's a separation.
Okay, as you know, in the next couple of meetings, we're going to have some former mayors here, current mayors, other council members. I think a lot of good questions were raised, and these questions should be asked to these individuals to give us some direction as we move forward. So with that, are there any other comments? Hearing none, and we will move on.
Wait, right.
I'm sorry.
I just had a question.
Commissioner Andrews.
So I guess at what point in our timeline do we think we'll start actually voting on things, making decisions, drafting? I feel like we're in this in limbo stage.
I think, after we have some discussions, when people feel more comfortable, I hear a lot of different questions and trying to figure out how is this going to work, how does it come together. Once we feel more comfortable with that, I think we'll get to a point where we can take a vote. It's not going to be a surprise. I mean, tonight was just a discussion. I made sure we were not going to have any decisions made. I don't see that happening at the next meeting. I want to get through all of the speakers so everyone can have an opportunity to ask their questions and kind of figure things out. And then I think we'll probably be at a point where we can make that decision. Commissioner Boyd.
I thought this meeting, this conversation we had tonight about the mayor was an important one and a good one. I wonder if we shouldn't schedule, and I'm asking the question because I don't know the answer, if we shouldn't schedule a similar discussion on the other key points that we're going to have to deal with. The council, the makeup of the council.
Absolutely.
You know, wards versus at-large and all of that. If we shouldn't have that conversation similar to tonight, where we just talk about it and air where we are at this moment in time, because there's still, it could be open for change. The other thing I think, if I could, Chairman, to my way of thinking, the other issue that's very big out there, looming, is the issue of the city attorney. And I think maybe it might be helpful to have a conversation about that position as well. And the other one is the Board of Water and Light. You know, we're hearing a lot about the Board of Water and Light. You know, where are we as a commission on that?
We're going to get to all of these issues, I can assure you that. I just, we don't want to take on too much at one time. I think we have to be a little methodical how we go through that. So starting with the mayor, starting with then, after that, the council structure. And at the same time, I mean, part of this has been, it's been somewhat difficult in terms of getting timing set up and for our speakers. There's a lot of different things that are going on in their lives, and trying to get everything together has been a little bit difficult. But I do have, I think at either the end of October, beginning of November, we've got the board coming in, Board of Water and Light, to talk about that. Again, if there are any particular speakers or groups that you might think that would have some input on this, let me know. We'll see what we can do. But I think we have to get through this structure thing first with the mayor form of strong government or the city manager, and then move from there. Councilmember Boyd.
One final comment or question. Our attorney raised the issue of drafting, and I've raised that issue before. Who's doing the drafting? Are we going to do it? Are we going to ask our attorney to do it? What?
Yeah, I think at this point, what I would like to do, if anybody has, any commissioner has a draft of language that they would like to put forward, they can certainly do that. I'm going to ask that if that's the case, you get it to our office by the Wednesday before the next meeting. So then we can get it to our attorneys, we can get it on the agenda as an item, or at least as a document there, so the public can see it, everybody can see it, and we'll have an opportunity to look at it. But again, as you start to submit any written comments or anything like that, or an amendment, let's make sure that we're doing it in time that we're actually dealing with that issue. So if you have something that you want to talk about with the mayor, or language about the mayor or the city manager, now would be the time to start thinking about that, putting that language together. And then probably that language would get reviewed and finalized by our attorney. Certainly we would take whatever suggestions that they're making. There's, I'm sure, a lot of things we haven't thought about that they have that we may need to insert in the language, or even have separate pieces of languages. So again, this is something we've never done before, so it's going to be kind of free-flowing, and we'll get it down. I mean, we'll work through it. Yes? No?
So at the next meeting,
Go ahead.
you know I'm going to talk.
Oh.
At the next meeting, so are you saying basically what we're going to have our speakers? We're going to be listening
Yes.
to speakers, because it would be my wish that as far as the city manager and strong mayor, that we take that vote as soon as possible.
I agree.
Because then we can do the rest of the description of department heads and stuff, we could do that down the road. And also I would ask again that, you know, whatever's going to be on the agenda, we know like as soon as possible after this meeting to give us time to do our research. And I'm thinking also some of the stuff that we maybe get from the attorney or drafts, we could maybe like all do that and make our comments at home and be ready to talk about it when we get to the dais rather than just start right here.
I will take that under, well, we're not to commissioner remarks. Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll go to public comment.
Okay, we have one speaker for the second session, Fred McLaughlin.
Okay. First of all, a quick question. In a strong mayor, doesn't council have a veto override as a protection?
No.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm thinking that provides a kind of balance. I hadn't heard anybody say anything about that. I'm wondering, you know, I'm sort of thinking like an architect here. I'm wondering if we're not sort of getting, in some ways, the cart before the horse. What I mean by that is, I sort of feel like in regards to talking about the structure of the government, it's kind of like me trying to conceive of what contractor to hire before I know what the building's going to be built out of. And I think that may bear strongly, as I'm thinking out loud here, to why I keep bringing up urban planning and zoning, is because it seems to me that the structure of what you want the city to be is going to have some effect on the way you structure the government. So it's sort of like you need to define the problem before you come up with a solution for what contractor to pick or what form of government is going to be best to manage to get this kind of structure built. And it makes me think of a quotation from Einstein, and I think I may have mentioned it to Jody one day. Einstein said, if somebody gave me 60 minutes to figure out how to save the planet, he said I would spend the first 59 minutes defining the problem and the last minute resolving it. And so I'm wondering if in trying to decide how we want the government structured, if we're not ahead of ourselves. I mean, it's a big deal to define what you want the community to be, granted that we have a community already here, but we're talking about revisiting our community as well as the structuring of the government. And I'm not sure that we can really make serious decisions about the nature of the government to achieve the kind of community we want until we define the community. So, and again, that brings me back to the question of community. I think the community is really the thing we're talking about here. And again, that's why I keep coming back to urban planning. Zoning is just a tool to enforce urban planning. But there needs to be some serious thinking about what we want our community to be in order to solve issues like affordable housing. I mean, really affordable housing, not relying on devices like grants, incentives, tax breaks, federal funds, state funds. There needs to be some latitude in developing some of these issues. Otherwise, they're going to rely on these devices that ultimately we're paying for anyway through our taxes. So it brings me back to the Constitution again, where it's talking about various things, and but in particular, my attention is drawn to the general welfare.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you.
Now's the time for commissioner remarks. We've had a lot tonight, so Commissioner Anderson.
I was just wondering if there's an update on streaming live on Facebook.
Oh,
I
just,
gave it during my report.
She didn't hear it.
We are.
We're live today.
right now.
I don't know how I missed that. I'm so sorry. Hi, Facebook.
yeah. And are there any other comments? Commissioner Lopez?
Just a request, early on, we talked about a city organizational chart that we could look at and to help us kind of visualize what we have. Thank you.
We'll see what we can do. Anything else? Moving forward with our meetings, I think at this point, we're going to try to have our attorney visit us remotely. That might save some money for us, so we're going to see how that goes at the next meeting. If it doesn't go well, we'll probably then have her here in person. If we want her in person, she certainly is available to do that, but we'll give that a go. Is that okay? All right. Hearing no other comments or remarks, we're adjourned.
Of not taking climate change seriously.
26-year-old Sanad Alwami is the kind of guy who just wants to help people.
Okay, أنا سند العوامي.
He's an activist, he works for local groups, and he's a volunteer for the Libyan Red Crescent in Derna, his hometown in eastern Libya.
الفيضان يعني كيف كانت قصته؟ طبعا بداية القصة كانت يعني بداية شهر سبتمبر.
Translating our conversation is Arwa Faroun, a Libyan journalist who traveled to Derna. Together, we ask Alwami about how the local branch of the Red Crescent prepared when they saw Storm Daniel coming last year.
We are not used to such a big natural disaster. We only worked and trained